Welcome to the Knowledge Seeker channel. The channel is dedicated to exploring critical issues in the world. This presentation is titled African Magical Science, Part 2, a discourse. As indicated in the title of this presentation, this Part 2 is a continuation of Part 1. The topic was broken into two because of the length. Consequently, it is necessary to listen to Part 1 and Part 2 in order to enhance the full understanding of the subject matter. The purpose of this presentation is to explore African magical science. It should be noted that in Africa, science involves both the physical, material, tangible, and the non-physical, immaterial, intangible qualities. Therefore, in the African view of knowledge, it is necessary to have an understanding of both qualities of any phenomenon being studied. In this regard, Western science is particularly focused on the study and understanding of the physical quality of any phenomenon being studied. Such knowledge in Africa is viewed as a partial knowledge because it only deals with the physical component of knowledge. To accomplish the goals of the presentation, the following arguments are made. 1. Magical science, which is a combination of both physical and spiritual mystical knowledge, is more advanced than modern science, which is limited to the study of the physical, tangible material quality of nature and the universe. 2. Many so-called scientific discoveries are a replication of already existing knowledge in Africa and many parts of the non-Western world. 3. Due to magical science, Africans are not limited by the laws of physics like Europeans due to European reliance on reason and logic. 4. The component of physical science that is closest to magical science is quantum physics. 5. Eventually, physical science will catch up with magical science when quantum physics is fully developed. And 6. At that point, comprehensive or complete knowledge of nature and the universe will be achieved scientifically. Now, in the African Magical Science Part 1, that is the previous presentation, the presentation stopped at the section titled Being Knowledgeable, that focus on the African view of what constitutes knowledgeability. In this Part 2 of the African Magical Science, the discussion starts with identifying some Western scholars, writers, intellectuals, scientists, and politicians who were members of secret esoteric societies. It is important to listen to the Part 1 of the topic in order to get a complete picture of the presentation. So let's look at some of the names of scientists and intellectuals who were members of mystical spiritual societies in the Western world. You have Isaac Newton, George Washington, former president of the USA, Abraham Lincoln, former president of the USA, writer Victor Hugo, artist Leonardo da Vinci, Blaise Pascal, Edith Piaf, René Descartes, Napoleon Bonaparte, Benjamin Franklin, Walt Disney, Francis Bacon, Michael Mayer, Robert Flood, Elias Ashmold, King Frederick William II, Robert Falcon, Paul Foster Case, Michael Wade, William Butler Yeats, and so on and so forth. These are just only a few of the names of Western scholars, intellectuals, artists that were also members of spiritual secret societies in the West. This is the picture of Isaac Newton on the left, and on the right you have the picture of Leonardo da Vinci, a great artist. As indicated above, the who and who in Western intellectual, artistic, scientific, literary, and political world were members of the Rosicrucian Order and other secret societies. They joined these organizations to further scientific and spiritual knowledge in realization of the fact that the world is made up of both physical and spiritual components. Thus, they follow the tradition of magical science as proposed by Thoth, the Egyptian god of knowledge. Therefore, modern science originated from magical science. Again, I repeat, modern science originated from magical science. Africa continues to engage in magical science rather than merely focusing on material science. It is ironic that the same European scientists who argue fervently for the separation of reason and faith, thereby limiting the parameters of modern science to the physical attributes of nature and the universe, were also members of esoteric spiritual societies, such as the Rosicrucian Order, Freemason, Illuminati, Toll, and other secret societies in the West. These scientific pioneers preached the rejection of faith, separated church from the state, and informed the world that reason and logic should be the guiding light for uncovering the truth of fact. Yet, were also members of spiritual societies. They knew that material science cannot be separated from spiritual mystical knowledge. So let's look at the traditional African religions and how they fit into the magical science. Thus, since magical science is basically the totality of knowledge that exists in the physical and spiritual world, Africans are devoted to mastering both physical and non-physical phenomena. To accomplish this, the traditional African religion, like the ancient Egyptian religion, is very important. Therefore, contrary to the negative portrayal of traditional African religions, be it voodoo or voodoo as in Benin, Ewe, Fanti, and Haiti, Ifa in Yoruba land, Urukare in Ijaw land, Candomblé in Brazil, Santeria in Cuba, Wage Fana in Oromo, Ngai and or Nkulukulu in Zulu land, Ngai in Maasai land, Ordinale in Igbo land, Nyasaye in Luo land, Bukongo in Congo, and Makuzanze or Bori in Hausa land. These religions are considered very sacred by African people, so much so that falsehood is not tolerated. Many Africans believe that their religions originated from God, hence have high spirituality. Africans do not need to read a book to know God or Goddess, since the supreme intelligence manifests to them in various ways. It should be noted that here the word God and Goddess are used because some African ethnic groups' view of God is in the male, while some ethnic groups view God in the female aspect. Therefore, it is proper to use God and Goddess in this presentation. Spiritual cleanliness or purity is very important to receive God's manifestation. Hypocrisy, pretense, lying, and so forth are not tolerated. Traditional African religions, which are referred to as ancestralism here, are based on absolute truth. This is why no African can swear an oath in the name of his or her ancestors and God or Goddess while lying. African religions are part of magical science because they enable people to connect with higher beings and the supreme intelligence to gather information and develop knowledge of any phenomenon. There is no secret that cannot be revealed through traditional African religions. Through traditional African religions, an individual can develop the ability to communicate with other beings, develop astral capabilities to visit other planets or realms of the universe. The ancestral-based religions enable some people to develop miraculous capabilities. Thus, unlike Christianity, Islam, and Buddhism, traditional African religions are so pure and undiluted that it is not necessary to read a book to know and receive the blessings of God or Goddess. This is why those Africans who were taken away to the Americas during the slave trade continue to practice ancestralism and invoke the deities. Because African religions are very godly and spiritual, they can be activated anywhere through prayer and libation. Hence, Africans in the diaspora, especially in Brazil, Cuba, Haiti, Jamaica, Garifuna, Suriname, Trinidad and Tobago, and so forth, activated the religions quite easily without reading a book. The spirituality of the African being is responsible for the high level of dance and singing capabilities among black people because music is part of the spiritual aspect of African cultures. Thus, an African does not need to read music to play music. The music flows and engulfs the body like spiritual possession. Apart from the capabilities embedded in the traditional African religions, African magical science enables some individuals to engage in feats that modern science is trying to uncover through research in quantum physics. What does this mean? Thus, in Africa, those who have advanced knowledge of nature and the universe can travel from place to place anywhere in the world without a physical plane or auto or boat. They can be in two or more places at the same time. They can contact other beings through oracular visitation. They can find out any information both physically and spiritually. Hence, in Africa, there are no secrets that cannot be uncovered through divination or oracular consultation with higher beings. Any information that science cannot uncover can easily be uncovered through African spirituality. There are some Africans who can disappear and reappear like the higher beings because of their high level of consciousness. There are those who can manipulate the destiny of other individuals. There are those that have developed advanced technological capabilities that can turn ordinary leaves into flying objects. There are those that can turn into other creatures. All these capabilities are possible because Africans engage in magical science and not limited by physical science. Note, in fact, many things that Western scientists have uncovered through research are already existing knowledge in Africa. The same could be said of in India, Tibet, China, Native America. Here you have on the left a picture of traditional African religious priests and priestesses, presumably somewhere in maybe Benin or Togo or Ghana or somewhere else in Black Africa. Then on the right, you have a picture of a traditional African religious ceremony in Brazil. In Brazil, the African religion is known as Candomblé. Let's look at the suppression of African magical science in the continent. While African magical science is very advanced, the knowledge is strategically suppressed. In other words, Africans are not encouraged to engage in the actualization of the advanced scientific, technological, and spiritual knowledge because of foreign conquest and colonization. The suppression started with Islamization and continued with Western colonization and Christianization through the formal educational system. How? How did this happen? In order to spread Islam, Islamic missionaries and jihadists preached, condemned, and took actions to destroy African cultures and religions. The Muslims ordered the Africans to forego their cultures and adopt the Islamic way. Basically, the Muslims compelled the Africans, sometimes through violence, to ignore their ancestors who had great mystical knowledge about the world. They established Arabic and Islamic schools without including important concepts in African cultures, philosophies, and religions in their educational curriculum. This resulted in producing educated and Islamized Africans who developed mastery in the study and understanding of Islam, the Quran, and Arab civilizations, and nothing about their African heritage. Basically, Islamic education resulted in wiping out African magical scientific capabilities, since such feats were considered un-Islamic and satanic. Thus, to engage in African magical science even today is considered devilish and satanic and un-Islamic. Similarly, after the Berlin Conference of 1884-1885, Western European nations colonized the entire African continent. Like the Islamic conquerors, Western powers too discouraged Africans from engaging in activities associated with magical science by referring to the African cultures and religions as primitive, barbaric, and ungodly. The Christian missionaries frontally attacked anything African and encouraged the total rejection of African beliefs, values, morals, and practices. Like the Muslims, the Christians established schools that taught Christian and biblical information and condemned African cultures. Now, let's see how formal education is used as an instrument of cultural destruction of African magical science. Since formal educational institutions were initially established by Islamic and Christian missionaries and evangelists, the educational curricula excluded African subjects since anything African was associated with Satan, evil, and ungodliness. Consequently, almost all Africans who have gone through the formal educational system and graduated from the primary, secondary, and higher educational institutions are very knowledgeable about Islamic, Arabic, European, and Christian subjects, and little or nothing about African cultures, religions, and civilizations. The discouragement of Africans from engaging in the study of African cultures, history, religion, and civilizations follow the same path that was adopted during slavery to discourage blacks in America from speaking their African dialects or worshiping their religions. Troy Williams wrote, and I quote, "Enslaved African families were broken up intentionally. Slaves were forbidden to speak in their native tongues or share history with their children. Moreover, it was illegal to teach slaves how to read and write," and I unquote. Based on the same tactics, most educated Africans are not conversant with their traditional cultures, religions, philosophies, history, and civilizations because the colonial powers and religious authorities forbade the study of African cultures and religions. In particular, the westernized schools focused entirely on reason and logic, secular humanism and science, and totally ignore anything African. The implication is that most formally educated Africans are culturally foreigners in their own societies because they know little or nothing about their cultural world. On the other hand, they have prodigious knowledge of Islam, Arabic culture and civilization, Western culture and civilization, and Christianity. They can recite and quote the Quran and the Bible effortlessly as if they wrote the holy books. Therefore, even African ruling elites are foreigners in their African cultural world because the colonially induced educational systems deprive them of the ability to engage in nation building and governance through the tactical application of the political and philosophical beliefs, values, and practices based on African cultural concepts and systems. Hence, almost all African citizens and their countries are merely mimicking the systems that their colonial powers left behind. This is why even today there is much hatred for anything African and a pathological preference for anything Arabic and European in the continent. So, most African Muslims and Christians continue to refer to the traditional religions as idol worshipping, satanic, and ungodly, even though they know that every ethnic group in the continent has a strong belief in a supreme god or goddess. They do this even though traditional African religions have strong moral foundations. Hence, deeds are broken into acceptable and unacceptable conduct. It is from this that the concept of abomination takes place. So in Africa, doing things the right way is very important in order to meet with the obligations of the traditional religious culture. Thus, magical science is not allowed to thrive. Quite often, Most educated Africans confuse sorcery with traditional religions and use the confusion to condemn the religions. Due to the hostile environment, research activities and applications pertaining to magical science are condemned as satanic, evil, and ungodly. This is why very negative terms are used to describe magical scientific practices and those who engage in them. For instance, anyone who has the capability to engage in teleportation, telepathy, is automatically branded as an evil person. Anyone who can foretell future events is looked upon as a follower of Juju or Ogbo and others discouraging terms. Anyone who has developed an ability to evade bullet shots is viewed as a follower of ungodly entities. Anyone who has a third eye is immediately attacked for being a non-Muslim or a non-Christian, therefore ungodly. Thus, most educated Africans, particularly Christians and Muslims, confuse sorcery with traditional African religions and magical science. They confuse traditional religious priestesses with native doctors who are commercialized medical practitioners. They pretend as if there are no sorcerers and evildoers in Christianity and Islam, but only exist in African ancestralism. It should be noted that millions of people have been killed in the name of Islam and Christianity. Due to the negativity attached to African ancestralism and magical science, not many universities in Africa have established a department of African religion, spirituality, and mysticism. Similarly, there is no university in Africa that has established a department of magical science so that a curriculum similar to the ancient Egyptian mystery schools could be offered. It should be noted that many Greek scholars who laid the foundation for Western education, scholarship, and intellectualism studied in the Egyptian mystery schools, as indicated earlier, where they learned courses in physical sciences, medicine, mathematics, astronomy, and subjects that deal with spiritual, mystical knowledge. Due to the bias generated against African cultures and religions, most educated Africans do not realize that the most advanced form of science exists in Africa. They do not realize that African magical science is a combination of material and non-material sciences. This means that Africa is replete with knowledge that borders on quantum physics that can easily be utilized to create advanced technologies like the ancient Egyptians, Sumerians, Ethiopians, Indians, Chinese, and Nubians. Instead, they use derogatory terms to describe scientific capabilities that enable some individuals to be in two or more places at the same time as practitioners of juju or ogbo or obia or magic and so forth. It was magical science that the Sumerians and Egyptians and others used to develop the pyramids and other complex structures that modern science cannot explain. The African tendency to condemn magical scientific capabilities could be attributed to the psychological impediment that Christianity, Islam, and formal education have imposed on the minds of educated African people. Therefore, it could be said that Africans continue to suffer from colonialism because they are educated to reject themselves and seek solace in other cultures. Now, it is possible for decolonization and independence to take place in Africa. It is strongly believed here that eventually Africans will be liberated from the colonial state in which they are today. When that time comes, they will appreciate the enormous knowledge, that is, both physical science and spiritual science that they have. When that time comes, they will establish the Department of Magical Science in their universities, like in ancient Egypt. When that time comes, they will utilize their knowledge of magical science to produce some of the most advanced technologies in the world that defy gravity. The process of African intellectual liberation has begun as Africans begin to produce technological products. Today, Burkina Faso and Zimbabwe have developed electric cars. In particular, Mr. Maxwell Chikomboso of Zimbabwe has produced a vehicle that uses radio frequencies as a source of energy instead of petroleum or battery. Radio frequencies too can be used to generate electricity at home, as Maxwell indicated. That means that in the future, petroleum and batteries will be unnecessary. This technology defies the laws of physics, and many scientists are puzzled. Other Africans too will begin to delve into their magical scientific skills to develop innovative technologies. Likewise, other African countries, including Ghana, Nigeria, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and others, are building various automobile systems. Thus, the march to reclaim African scientific and technological ingenuity has begun as Africans realize that they have limitless capability through magical science, as Thoth and Imhotep and other ancestors did in the past. Thus, in the next 30 or more years, Africa will become a major technological center in the world as Africans combine their knowledge of material and immaterial sciences to produce advanced technological platforms and systems. This is the picture of Mr. Maxwell Chikomboso of Zimbabwe, the personality who produced radio frequency technology to propel cars. The Chinese and the Indians have never forsaken their magical scientific capability like the Africans do today. This is why the Chinese integrate scientific medicine and herbal medicine. Hence, in China, scientific doctors can prescribe both scientific drugs and herbal drugs simultaneously to their patients. India is a storehouse of mystical knowledge. Hence, the Indians are not shy about their spiritual capabilities. Some of the oldest and most enlightening books about the knowledge of the world in terms of mysticism, science, and technology originated from India. Books like the Mahabharata and Bhagavad are excellent examples, and millions of people continue to read these books. Most Africans will continue to run away from themselves. Conclusion. 1. Indeed, magical science, which is a combination of both physical and spiritual knowledge, is more advanced than modern science, which is limited to the study of the physical, tangible, material quality of nature and the universe. 2. Many so-called scientific discoveries are a replication of already existing knowledge in Africa and many parts of the non-Western world. In order to justify their discoveries, modern scientists refer to existing knowledge about various phenomena as superstitions and myths until they rediscover them scientifically. 3. Indeed, due to the mastery of magical science, Africans are not limited by the laws of physics, since they can apply physical and spiritual knowledge simultaneously. 4. The component of physical science that is closest to magical science is quantum physics. Africa is rich in knowledge about the ability to travel through different portals and universal dimensions, the ability to defy gravity, the ability to appear and disappear, the ability to communicate to other beings in the universe, and the ability to tell the absolute truth by contacting the Akashic record. This is why no African will lie by swearing in the name of his or her ancestors, deities, and God, regardless of whether he or she is a Christian or a Muslim, a billionaire or a head of state or a professor. On the other hand, an African will lie while swearing an oath using the Bible or the Quran. This is why most public officials are corrupt, because they are not afraid to lie in the name of their adopted religions. 5. Eventually, physical science will catch up with magical science when quantum physics is fully developed. And 6. At that point, comprehensive or complete knowledge of nature and the universe will be achieved scientifically. Eventually, the integration will take place in Africa when it becomes the nerve center for the production of advanced technologies through integrated science. Africans will use their knowledge to develop systems that defy gravity. Thank you for listening to this presentation. Please subscribe to the channel and listen to other captivating presentations. Again, thank you so much. Please do not forget to listen to African Magical Science Part 1 as well as Part 2, which is this one. Again, thank you.